My father calmly leaned back in his leather chair, as composed as ever, and slowly let out a breath. "This is not up for discussion, Catherine," he stated, placing his cigar in the ashtray as if the conversation was already concluded. My hands clenched at my sides, but I refused to give in. "So that's it?" I sharply questioned. "You'd rather entrust everything to Grant, someone who doesn't even care, than let me prove myself. Is it just because I'm a woman?" He didn't even flinch. "This firm is for your brother to manage, Catherine," he said firmly. "You've excelled in your education and will make a wonderful wife one day, but this isn't your place. My name is Catherine Mercer. I'm 26 years old, a Harvard-educated lawyer, and the daughter of Henry Mercer, owner of Mercer and Associates, one of Dallas's most powerful law firms. My entire life has been dedicated to proving myself, excelling in academics, winning debates, and graduating with honors so I could follow in my father's footsteps. But standing there in his office, enveloped by the scent of leather and cigars, I felt my world shift. It didn't matter how hard I worked or how much I loved the law. To him, I was merely his daughter, destined to marry well and stay out of the way. I looked him directly in the eye, my voice now steady. "Grant doesn't care about this firm, Dad. He's reckless. He barely passed community college and has no idea how to run a business. You know that as well as I do." My father sighed, rubbing his temple as if I were the unreasonable one. "Grant will learn. He's my son, Catherine. It's his birthright to take over Mercer and Associates. And you?" He paused, his voice softening slightly. "You have other options, a future that doesn't involve the stress of running a firm. I'm protecting you." A bitter laugh escaped my lips. "Protecting me?" I scoffed, shaking my head. "You're not protecting me, Dad. You're holding me back. I've earned this. I've worked harder than anyone, including Grant, and you know it. But you won't even give me a chance because you're too set in your ways to see what I'm capable of." His expression hardened, and I knew I had pushed too far. "That's enough, Catherine," he said, his voice sharp. "We're done here?" I stormed out of his office, my heels echoing through the marble halls of our family estate. My mother was in the parlor, quietly arranging flowers in a vase. She looked up as I passed, her expression soft but weary. "Catherine," she said gently, "what happened?" I stopped, turning to her with a mix of frustration and desperation. "He won't let me work at the firm," I said, my voice breaking. "He's handing everything over to Grant, and he expects me to smile and accept it." She sighed, her hands stilling over the flowers. "Your father, he has his ways," she said, her tone hesitant. "But maybe it's best not to push him, dear. He means well." I stared at her, stunned. "Means well," I repeated. "Mom, he's throwing away everything I've worked for because I'm a woman. How can you stand there and defend that?" She lowered her gaze, and I could see the years of quiet submission etched into her face. "I just don't want to see you hurt, Catherine," she said softly. "Sometimes it's easier to let things be." Her words hung in the air, and I realized in that moment that I was on my own. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the weight of my father's words pressed down on me. I thought about everything I'd done to reach this point. Late nights poring over case law, the endless debates at Harvard, the sacrifices I'd made to uphold the Mercer name. And for what? To be told I didn't belong, that my only value was to marry into another powerful family, the thought made my stomach churn. The next morning, I was halfway through packing my suitcase when my bedroom door creaked open. My mother stood there, her face pale and confused. "Catherine, what are you doing?" she asked, her voice laced with worry. Before I could answer, my father appeared behind her, his brows furrowed in irritation. "What's all this?" he demanded, stepping into the room. "Where do you think you're going?" Grant then casually leaned against the door frame, still in his robe. "Packing for a vacation, sis?" he asked with a smirk. I snapped the suitcase shut and stood tall, facing them all. "I'm leaving," I stated simply, "since I'm not welcome at the firm and apparently don't belong in this family's plan. I'm going to find a place where I do." My father's face darkened, and my mother clutched her pearls, looking as though she might cry. "Catherine," she said softly, "don't do this. Let's talk about it." But I shook my head, my resolve unshaken. "There's nothing to talk about. You've all made your priorities clear." My father's jaw tightened, and he stepped closer. "Don't be ridiculous, Catherine," he said, his tone cold and dismissive. "This is your home. Where else would you go? And for what?" To make some sort of point. I met his gaze without flinching. "Yes, Dad," I said firmly, "to make a point that I'm worth more than being pushed aside for someone who hasn't earned a damn thing. You made it clear last night that I have no place in your firm, so I'll find a firm that values what I bring to the table." Grant let out a low chuckle, shaking his head. "You're really making a big deal out of nothing." "Cat," he said, crossing his arms, "you're throwing a tantrum just because Dad isn't handing you the keys to the kingdom." His smug tone pushed me over the edge. "This isn't a tantrum, Grant," I snapped. "It's me taking control of my life, something you've never had to do because everything's been handed to you." My father raised a hand, silencing us both. "Enough," he said sternly. "Catherine, you're not leaving. You belong here with your family." I shook my head, picking up my suitcase. "No, Dad, I belong somewhere I'm valued, and clearly that's not here." I walked past them, my suitcase rolling behind me as I made my way down the grand staircase. My mother followed, her voice trembling. "Catherine, please don't go," she said softly. "We can figure this out as a family." I stopped at the base of the stairs and turned to look at her, the woman who had spent her life suppressing her own voice to maintain peace. "Mom," I said gently, "I love you, but I can't keep pretending that things will change if I stay. They won't." My father stood at the top of the stairs, watching silently, his face unreadable. Grant leaned against the banister, clearly unfazed, as if my departure meant nothing. I opened the front door and turned back one last time. "When you're ready to treat me like more than just a daughter who needs to marry well, you know where to find me," I said, my voice calm but firm. Then I walked out, the crisp morning air hitting my face as I closed the door behind me. For the first time in my life, I felt truly free. I didn't look back after leaving that house. Within days, I secured an interview at one of Dallas's most respected law firms. They didn't care that I was a Mercer. All they cared about were my credentials and my drive. When I walked into that office, I wasn't Henry Mercer's daughter. I was Catherine Mercer, Harvard graduate and determined attorney. By the end of the week, they offered me a position, and for the first time, I felt like I belonged somewhere for what I could do, not for who I was. The work was challenging but rewarding, and I thrived in an environment where I wasn't constantly being compared to someone else. My new boss, a sharp and modern man named Richard Hayes, took me under his wing. He valued my insight and pushed me to take on more responsibility. Within a few months, I was handling high-profile cases and earning the respect of my colleagues. It wasn't the life I had envisioned for myself growing up, but it was mine. And that made all the difference, Dot. As much as I was thriving professionally, the nights were harder. Cutting ties with my family wasn't easy, no matter how justified it felt. There were moments, quiet ones like coming home to an empty apartment after a long day, when the weight of it all would hit me. I missed my mother's gentle presence, even if she never stood up for me. I even missed the chaos Grant brought to the house, as infuriating as he was. But what hurt the most was knowing my father didn't think twice about letting me go. Months passed, and I poured everything I had into my work. The cases were demanding, often leaving me in the office late into the night, but I thrived under the pressure. With each victory, my confidence grew. I wasn't just a lawyer anymore. I was a force to be reckoned with. Richard Hayes, my boss, started assigning me to more high-stakes cases, and soon I was gaining a reputation as one of the firm's rising stars. The growth wasn't just professional, it was personal, too. I learned to stand on my own, to make decisions without worrying about whether they would please my father or fit into the mold my family had crafted for me. Every step forward felt like proof that I was more than they had ever given me credit for. I wasn't just Henry Mercer's daughter. I was Catherine Mercer, and I was making a name for myself on my own terms. One afternoon, Richard called me into his office. It was spacious but unpretentious, a reflection of the man himself. He gestured for me to take a seat and leaned back in his chair, his piercing blue eyes studying me intently. "Catherine," he began, his tone measured, "I have a case I think you're ready for. It's high stakes, complicated, and it's going to put you in the spotlight." I nodded, intrigued. "What's the case?" I asked, leaning forward slightly. He hesitated for a moment, then continued, "We're representing a client in a major litigation against Mercer and Associates. They're suing your father's firm for negligence in a contract dispute. The stakes are enormous, and the case is gaining attention." He paused, watching my reaction closely. The words hit me like a ton of bricks. My stomach tightened, and for a moment, I couldn't speak. "You want me to represent someone suing my father's firm?" I finally said, my voice steadier than I felt. Richard nodded. "I know it's personal, Catherine, but that's exactly why I want you on this. You know how Mercer and Associates operates, and you're one of the sharpest lawyers we have. If anyone can win this case, it's you." I took a deep breath, trying to process what he was asking. "Richard," I said slowly, "you realize what this could mean for me personally and professionally. This isn't just another case. It's my family." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk. "I understand that," he said firmly, "but this is your chance to show what you're capable of, to take on the people who underestimated you and prove them wrong. Think about it, Catherine. This could be the defining case of your career." I sat back in the chair, the weight of the offer settling heavily on my shoulders. "This is a lot to take in," I said, my voice quieter now. Richard nodded, his expression understanding. "I don't expect you to decide right here and now. It's a big ask, Catherine, and I know how personal this is for you." I met his gaze, grateful for his patience. "Would it be all right if I sleep on it?" I asked, my tone more measured. I need to think about how this could affect everything. Not just my career, but I trailed off, unsure how to finish the sentence. "Take all the time you need," Richard said, his voice steady. "But don't take too long. We need to move fast on this, and I want you on the team. Let me know by the end of the day, tomorrow." That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with everything at stake. Taking the case meant going up against my father, the man who had dismissed me and handed everything to Grant without a second thought. It also meant going head-to-head with my family's legacy, the name that had opened so many doors for me, even as it closed to others. But it also meant proving once and for all that I could stand on my own, even if it meant burning the last remaining bridge to my family. For 2 days, I went back and forth, weighing the risks and rewards. I thought about my father's cold dismissal of everything I'd worked for, about my mother's quiet resignation, and about Grant's smug sense of entitlement. But I also thought about the chance to show everyone that I wasn't just Henry Mercer's daughter. By the end of the second day, I made up my mind. I walked into Richard's office the next morning, my shoulders squared and my voice steady. "I'll take the case," I said simply. His face lit up with approval. "I knew you would," he said with a grin. "Now, let's get to work." The day of the first litigation proceeding arrived, and the tension in the air was palpable. As I entered the courtroom, I clutched my briefcase tightly, my heels clicking against the polished floor with every step. My client walked beside me, confident in my abilities. But all I could think about was the moment I knew was coming. As I approached the front of the courtroom, I saw them, my father and Grant, sitting at the opposing table, their faces turned toward me. And as soon as our eyes met, I felt their shock hit like a tidal wave. My father's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing as recognition dawned. Grant's mouth fell open slightly before he quickly masked his surprise with a smug smirk, though I could see the unease in his expression. I set my briefcase on the table and met their stares head-on. I wasn't going to look away or falter. I was here to do a job, and nothing not their surprise, not their disapproval, was going to throw me off. For a brief moment, my father's gaze softened, but he quickly composed himself, leaning over to whisper something to Grant. I didn't care what he said. I was ready. As the proceedings began, I slipped into my role seamlessly. Every motion, every argument, every document I presented was executed with precision. I kept my tone calm, my demeanor collected, and my focus solely on the case. When the judge addressed me, I responded with confidence, never faltering under the weight of my father's presence or Grant's smug glances. I wasn't Catherine, the daughter or sister, in that room. I was Catherine Mercer, attorney for the plaintiff, and I intended to win. Even when Grant fumbled through his arguments, clearly unprepared, I didn't let it show on my face. I treated him as I would any opposing counsel, with respect but zero leniency. Every time he misspoke or misrepresented a fact, I countered with clarity, backing up my points with solid evidence and case law. My father sat quietly for most of it, his expression unreadable, but I could feel his eyes on me. It didn't matter. I wasn't there to earn his approval anymore. I was there to do my job, and I was doing it well. After a few sessions, it became painfully obvious, at least for my father and Grant, that I was dominating the case. Every argument Grant brought to the table crumbled under the weight of my counterpoints. His inexperience was glaring, and my preparation left him scrambling for answers he didn't have. My father tried to step in once or twice, but even he couldn't salvage the damage Grant had done. The tide was turning fast, and everyone in the room knew it. By the fourth session, their side proposed a settlement. I could see the frustration etched into my father's face as their counsel approached mine with the terms. After a few back-and-forth adjustments, we agreed to a resolution that heavily favored my clients. As the paperwork was signed, I caught my father glancing at me from across the room. He looked defeated, maybe even regretful. Grant, on the other hand, avoided my gaze entirely, staring at the table like a chastised schoolboy. I didn't say a word to either of them. My work here was done, and I had proven exactly what I'd set out to. Usually, when a session ended, I would stay behind to wrap up with my client and exchange pleasantries with the other lawyers. It was something I always did, a small gesture of professionalism and respect, regardless of how contentious the case might have been. But this time, there was no opportunity. My father and Grant had already gathered their things and left the room without so much as a glance in my direction. No handshake, no word of acknowledgement, not even a curt, "Well done." It stung more than I wanted to admit. Even after everything, a part of me had hoped for some kind of recognition, some small sign that they'd seen what I was capable of and respected it. Instead, they walked away, silent and defeated, leaving me standing there with the weight of unfinished business pressing on my chest. I took a deep breath, brushed it off, and refocused on my client. I had won the case. That was what mattered. That evening, back at the firm, my colleagues greeted me with applause as I walked through the doors. Richard was the first to approach, clapping me on the shoulder with a proud grin. "Well done, Catherine," he said, raising a glass of champagne. "You were flawless in there. That settlement is a big win for us, and your client couldn't have asked for a better advocate." The team had set up a small celebration in the break room, complete with drinks and AR. My client even stopped by to express their gratitude, shaking my hand firmly. "You were incredible, Catherine," they said. "We couldn't have done this without you." For the first time that day, I let myself smile, surrounded by people who valued me for my skills and hard work. I felt a sense of accomplishment that no words from my father or Grant could have given me. This was my victory, and I owned it. Later that night, alone in my apartment, the glow of the city lights filtered through the blinds as I sat by the window with a glass of wine. The adrenaline from the day had worn off, and in the quiet, my thoughts drifted back to my family. I replayed the courtroom moments in my head, the way my father's face tightened with every argument I made, the way Grant couldn't even look me in the eye when it was over. I had expected them to be angry or defensive, but the silence they left me with was harder to bear. For years, I had dreamed of earning my father's respect, of proving to him that I was worthy not just of his name but of a place in the firm I had once idolized. And now, even after winning a case against them, I wasn't sure what I had achieved. Did they finally see me for who I was, or was I just a reminder of their failure? The questions lingered unanswered, as I stared out at the Dallas skyline, wondering if the ties I'd cut could ever truly be mended. The next morning, as I walked into the office, the usual buzz of conversation and ringing phones greeted me. I barely had time to settle in before Richard approached, a curious look on his face. "Catherine," he said, his tone cautious but warm, "your father is here. He's waiting in your office." The words stopped me in my tracks. "My father?" I asked, trying to keep my expression neutral, though my stomach flipped. Richard nodded. "He came in about 20 minutes ago, said he wanted to speak with you. Take your time. I'll hold your calls." I thanked him, though my mind was already racing as I made my way down the hall. When I opened the door to my office, there he was, Henry Mercer, sitting in the chair across from my desk, his hands clasped tightly in front of him. He looked up as I entered, his expression unreadable, though the slight furrow in his brow betrayed something regret, maybe. "Catherine," he said simply, his voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. I closed the door behind me, unsure of what to expect. "Dad," I replied, keeping my tone even. "What are you doing here?" He stood up slowly, brushing his hands down his suit jacket as though trying to steady himself. "I came here to talk," he said, his tone measured but serious. To say some things I should have said already, I walked over to my desk, setting my bag down carefully. "All right," I said, folding my arms. "I'm listening." He hesitated, glancing out the window, before turning back to me. "You were brilliant in that courtroom, Catherine," he began, his voice softening. "I've seen a lot of lawyers in my time, some of the best in the business, and what you did, it was remarkable. You were prepared, professional, and relentless. You left no doubt about who the better lawyer was." His words caught me off guard, but I kept my expression steady, waiting for him to continue. "I've spent so much of my life believing that legacy meant keeping things the way they used to be," he said, his voice tinged with regret. "That sons should take over what the father built. I thought I was doing the right thing, pushing Grant to step up, even when I knew deep down he wasn't ready or willing." He ran a hand through his silver hair, sighing deeply. "But I see now that I've been wrong. You've worked harder than anyone, Catherine. You've earned everything you have, and I failed to recognize that I failed you." I blinked, unsure how to respond. This was the man who had spent years dismissing my ambition, telling me to settle for a life that didn't match my dreams. And now he was standing here admitting he was wrong. "Why now?" I finally asked, my voice steady but cautious. "Why are you telling me this now, after everything that's happened?" He met my gaze, his blue eyes filled with an honesty I hadn't seen before. "Because I saw what you're capable of," he said simply, and I realized I'd been a fool. "Grant isn't ready, and he may never be. But you've proven you have what it takes, not just to succeed, but to lead." He stepped closer, his tone almost pleading. "Catherine, I'm asking you to come back, to take your rightful place at Mercer and Associates. The firm needs you. I need you." The words hung in the air, and for a moment I didn't know what to say. I had spent so long fighting for this moment, dreaming of hearing those words from him, but now that they were here, I wasn't sure if I wanted them. "What about Grant?" I asked finally. "What happens to him?" My father's face tightened, and he nodded slowly. "Grant will stay, but he'll take on a role more suited to his skills." This is about you, Catherine. It's about giving you what you've always deserved. I took a deep breath, letting his words settle for a moment. I need time to think about this, I said finally, my voice calm but firm. It's not something I can decide right away. A lot has happened, and I need a few days to figure out what's best for me. My father nodded, his expression serious but understanding. Of course, he said. Take all the time you need. I'm not asking for an answer today. I just needed to say my piece. He moved toward the door, but before he left, he turned back to face me. Catherine, he said, his tone softer. Now, I know I haven't said this enough, or maybe ever, but I am proud of you. Watching you in that courtroom, you were better than I ever was. Better than I could have imagined. His words hit me harder than I expected, and for a moment I just stared at him, unsure of how to respond. He gave me a small, almost hesitant smile before turning and walking out of the office, leaving me alone with my thoughts. As I sat at my desk, his words echoed in my mind, better than I ever was. For so long, I had fought to prove myself to him, to show that I was more than just his daughter, that I was capable, strong, and deserving of respect. And now, hearing those words, I felt a surge of pride that I couldn't ignore. This wasn't just about him anymore. I was proud of myself for standing my ground, for thriving on my own, and for showing the world and my father exactly what I was capable of. That now, it's late at night, and I'm lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about what to do. My father's offer is everything I've worked for, everything I thought I wanted, but going back would mean stepping into a world where I was once dismissed, where I'd have to navigate the shadows of old wounds and fractured trust. It would mean working alongside Grant, knowing how little he valued what we both stand to represent. And yet, staying where I am has its own challenges. This firm has been good to me, and I've grown here in ways I never imagined, but it's not my legacy. It's not Mercer and Associates, the place I dreamed of running since I was a little girl. If I go back, I'd have a chance to shape that legacy on my terms, to prove that the name belongs to me just as much as anyone else. I haven't made up my mind yet. The choice feels impossible, and the weight of it keeps me awake. What would you do in my situation? Please share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your perspective. Hey there! Did you like the story? If you did, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot and makes sure you won't miss out on more great stories we share here. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.